Now back to the show. This is The Law Show on CL 650.
Well, interesting choice of music from our producer, Dwayne Bishop, as we have the refugee song from those Tom Petty people. Welcome back to The Law Show here on CL 650. I'm Sterling Fox, joined in studio by Gordon Maynard and Rudy Kisher from Maynard, Kisher, Stojcevic, immigration and citizenship lawyers in downtown Vancouver at 1168 Hamilton Street. We're talking about the challenges facing the new government of Canada, the new immigration minister, and of course the fact that world events don't ever just stop. And the fact that in addition to taking over the new department and running of the country, they also have to adapt to new changing world conditions. And that's what we've been talking about this morning in the context of refugees and some changes and the commitments and how able the new government is to realistically accommodate 25,000 new people by the end of the calendar year. And Rudy Kisher, you said that the minister is now parsing his words very carefully so as to allow more wriggle room all the time as this process really becomes a monster in terms of just the timeline attached to 25,000 people in 6 weeks or less. Not going to happen, is it?
I think it'll be very hard for them to make it happen. I mean, if you take number one, it has to be sort of, if they're going to do the security checks, they've got to make that decision. And I think what people are missing when they talk about, well, you can make the Canadian government do the security checks quickly, right? I mean, Canada has control over that. They can give it to
CSIS or whoever,
CSIS
sure.
or CBSA or RCMP and say, do the checks. But we often rely on our partners. We often rely on the Americans to give us data. So we send off names to them, say, do you have anything?
Interpol would be
we
another
send it off to Interpol.
Sure.
Is this on their priority list? I can't imagine Interpol, what they're dealing with in Europe right now, is going to see our resettlement program as a priority. So I think there's going to be some challenges with getting the security checks they want. Gordon has mentioned maybe they're going to come in, in terms of a TRP program, which lets them in temporarily without that security check. But I don't think we've never had a history of being we've had a history of being able to do it quickly, but not the numbers that they're talking about in 6 weeks. 500 people a day. Security check, medical check, a place to live. And also, I mean, I've been talking to some Mosaic and other organizations here in terms of helping with the private sponsorship. And, you need resources on the ground to welcome these people.
Exactly.
Where are you going to put them? And if you have to put them in what they did with the Bosnians is they moved them first to air bases, right, or to military bases.
And they're talking about that again this time, too.
And maybe that's what you have to do. But then you've got to resettle them twice and make sure that there's in the community where they're going, do we have the social support workers that are going to be there to help these people settle effectively, right, so that they don't avoid as much trauma as possible and hardship coming to Canada.
Right.
Can you get that available in 6 weeks? I think it's pretty tough.
Gordon Maynard, you raised a very, very important point just before we went to the break, talking about these quotas. We have numbers we accept in Canada. It used to be about 250,000, but now we're up to about 275,000 new people come into Canada every year. That's our quota. And to use Rudy's analogy of seats on the plane, that's it. So if we have a hard number of, say, 275, and now we've committed to 25,000 refugees, so that means some other class is going to get reduced in terms of income, if indeed we're going to stick to our quota of 275. What do you know about this quota? Is it a moving target, or is somebody going to end up losing that otherwise might have gotten in this year?
Good question. Every year, the minister is mandated to table in Parliament an immigration plan for the following year. And in that plan, the government sets the targets of what they seek to achieve in terms of overall immigration flow. But that also talks about the different classes within that flow.
Right, okay.
So they divide it roughly into economic classes, which are federal skilled workers, CEC, people who come in through express entry, that sort of thing, investors, that sort of thing. And non-economic flow, which is refugees and family members.
Right, okay.
Now, under the Conservative government, there was always a push towards having more and more higher percentage of economic immigrants compared to non-economic.
And they changed the ratio, didn't they? Because we were talking about this during the break a couple of minutes ago, Rudy. Under the previous Liberal regime, it was never 50-50, but they were sort of 60-40, and then the Conservatives come in, and as Gordon has accurately pointed out, they changed the ratio to accommodate what? Their political agenda, Gordon? Was that the reason that they went to that 70-30 mix?
I'd say it's more than a political agenda. I think it's an economic agenda and an assessment of what's the best flavor of immigration program to suit the needs of Canada. Everybody's going to have debates about this, but that's where they put it.
Okay.
Some of that might be politically driven, and some of it's logically driven.
I think a lot of I think some of it's logically driven, but I think on the base of it is basically that they have seen. They're an economic small c government, and they're supporting business. So
right.
what does business want to see? Business wants to see people coming on temporary foreign workers and see skilled workers coming in to fill their needs, and that's where the economic, that's the economic category. They've never run themselves as a sort of family-friendly, They may be the family party, but they don't want people coming in that are going to use up social resources.
But in order to achieve that plan that the Conservatives had, this is why you had the restrictions on the number of parents that could come in. This is why you had increases in the requirements for sponsorship of family members. It was all aimed at driving down the non-economic numbers and increasing the economic numbers. So for 2015, it's expected that we'll have about 190,000 economic immigrants out of that 280,000.
Okay.
That's roughly 65%.
Right.
There will probably be 10% refugees. Which is
higher than usual, right?
No, that's their normal numbers.
Okay.
20,000 a year is their normal numbers. I'm not talking about the Liberal plan. This is the plan that was put in place last year for 2015.
Gotcha. Okay.
And then there's probably 25%, 24% family class, which are spouses, parents, grandparents. Okay. Now the Liberal government made promises, one of which was bringing in 25,000 refugees from Syria.
Changing the mix.
And increasing the family numbers, so increasing the number of parent applications. Now, what hasn't been made clear is whether this is intended to be a reshifting of the percentages, where, yes, we'll increase the numbers here, but that means we'll lose the numbers over here in order to maintain the overall numbers of 280,
right.
Or whether these are additional entries. So the overall numbers are probably going to go up to, what, 300,000 over the next year?
Sounds like it.
We don't have those answers yet.
When does the minister usually make his mission statement on the annual basis to Parliament?
Right around now.
Okay. So anytime before Christmas.
That's right.
Okay.
And,
but he's got a little on his plate now with 25,000 refugees.
Yeah. So I mean, these questions haven't been answered. Right? We don't see a clear statement about what the next year's goal is in light of these promises.
Right. One item on the immigration file that we have had numerous conversations about on this program with you too, and Alex, of course, is the whole matter of the temporary foreign worker. Now, that did not come up, to my knowledge, as a campaign issue. Neither party that I'm aware of campaigned much. There was certainly not much made of it. So what happens to the temporary foreign worker program now that we've got a new government, Rudy, with perhaps different priorities?
Yeah, I think during the election we had a lot of immigration issues that came up. Right?
No doubt about it.
The NICAB, right?
Yes.
The refugee resettlement, stripping citizenship from people that had alternatives.
And we'll get to that a little later on the show.
So I think there was plenty in the media that this never came up. The Conservatives did a good job, I think, in terms of making. If you take a look at 2 summers ago when the issue about temporary foreign workers either being exploited came up, that they crushed that extremely quickly in terms of putting in a lot of enforcement mechanisms to prevent abuses of foreign workers.
Right.
The Liberal Party has said they're going to review that to make sure that foreign workers are adequately protected.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, they want to remove the cost. The Conservatives have added a cost that if you want to hire a foreign worker, you've got to pay $1,000. So it's gone on the Conservatives under a very short time period. It went from there was no fee to costing $1,000. Now, they said they're going to remove that, particularly only in the case of nannies. So somebody who wants to hire a nanny, $1,000. Well, that's $1,000 you could be using to pay for help. Now you're having to pay it to the government to process this application. So they're talking about removing that. I think when it's been very clear, I think, in some of the Liberal statements and in Trudeau's statement that he doesn't see us being a place of allowing a two-tier system where we have cheap foreign labor, right? And there's been concerns about that. So I don't think I think it's going to get harder to get temporary foreign workers. Is my gut on this, because whereas the Conservatives were business friendly, you want labor, we're going to help you get labor. You know what you need. If you think these people are qualified, we're going to let them in. I think we're not going to see a lot of action on this file, is my guess.
And Gordon, you have strong feelings on this temporary foreign workers program as well.
Rudy and I discuss a lot of things, and we sometimes disagree. I would be horrified if there wasn't change to the foreign worker program.
In what way?
Well, I think in the name of protecting jobs for Canadians and preventing abuses of foreign workers, the former government enacted a very draconian system that was very ill thought out. And I think that it has made it extremely difficult for a number of businesses. Were there legitimate concerns about bringing in foreign workers in certain business lines? Yes. Were there employers who were not being honest with the government about what they were doing? Yes. Did you need to have a one-size-fits-all solution that made it impossible or extremely difficult for businesses who depend on foreign workers to support their Canadian workforce? Right now, the system is broken. It is broken. Employers hate it. Lawyers hate it. They're very difficult people to deal with because they've been given a very hard-line mandate to, at all costs, it seems, keep out foreign workers. It's an extremely hard process right now. I think it needs to be reviewed, and I'm sorry that it wasn't a political issue, but it's one of those things that's mum and apple pie.
Right.
I mean, how do you go out and argue that protecting Canadian jobs needs to be rethought? That's the way the Conservatives sold it.
Right.
Unfortunately, I think their solution was actually detrimental to the employment of Canadians. So I hope there are changes.
Yeah, I think I mean, well, I agree with Gordon that there could be changes, that there needs to be changes. I just don't think there's a political appetite there for it right now. I mean, they have run on a program of, we want to protect people's rights, so people really shouldn't be coming in as temporary foreign workers because that's when they get exploited. What we really want is them coming in as permanent residency.
Not all foreign workers are exploited.
I'm not saying they are, but
right.
that's the way the Liberals have portrayed it, and that's the risk factor. And then when they've made these promises, it's like big budgetary promises. They've promised, well, we're going to let in more parents and grandparents. We're going to let in, we're going to make it easier for nannies to get in. We're going to make it easier we're going to make it faster for spouses to come. We're going to bring in all these refugees. Who's going to pay the price? To me, I think it's going to be the temporary foreign worker file. You're going to see it sit and say, well, that's not our priority right now. We really don't want more.
So as we wrap this segment up, though, the question or the thought at the beginning was, going back to your seats on the plane analogy, Rudy, if the government decides they're going to stick with the roughly 280,000 number we've been consistent with now for the past few years, and the 25,000 new refugees coming in from Syria or Lebanon, that's going to cause 25,000 other people not to be admitted into Canada, or are we likely to increase those numbers? It remains a mystery, and will so until we hear from the minister and his plans for next year when they're tabled in the House of Commons. This is The Law Show on CIL 650. We're back with lots more right after this.
There's more of the show still ahead. This is The Law Show on CIL 650.